Thursday, but I kind of want to start with this released evidence from the Epstein files. You want to
Yeah,
start there? Yeah,
let's
let's
do
start
it.
there.
Yeah.
That's the big story in Washington today. You have new photos that show President Trump had a lot cozier of a relationship with an accused pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein. These photos of him partying, these sexual lewd and explicit photos. Break it down for us and what people are saying in D.C. about the release of this new evidence.
So the House Oversight Committee has been the central vehicle for extracting what we would call Epstein files, although
Yeah.
it's not the Epstein file. Like these, as far as we know, these are separate from the Epstein file that the Department of Justice has been ordered by Congress to release next week. So the Epstein files that have come out have included the emails that showed that, Donald Trump, according to Jeffrey Epstein's brother, was, quote, blowing Bubba and so on. But these are photos, and photos have a lot more weight to them than emails. And the photos show Donald Trump with, I think it was 6 women, and the women all have in these photos have their faces redacted. A lot of people have been characterizing these as some of the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's sexual violence. I don't know that we know that for sure yet, but it does look bad. But it doesn't just include Donald Trump. Some of the photos include Steve Bannon, one of the longtime Trump boosters and strategists, Bill Gates, Woody Allen, Bill Clinton, right? So there is a variety of people who the Democrats are who the House Oversight Committee are starting to produce evidence, data on the Epstein estate, on Epstein Island, on some of these parties that he's been having. And so it's blowing up, obviously, because, I think that there are two kind of like, if you take a step back, there are two really important things to note, right? One is Donald Trump, of course, this is more evidence that he's lying. I think that's the top line here. He
That's the
did know
headline.
Jeffrey Epstein. They were very close. He did spend a lot of time with Jeffrey Epstein. But the other is that the House Oversight Democrats are willing to throw Democrats under the bus as well, right? Bill
Yeah.
Clinton, Bill Gates, I think he's a Democrat, but he's not Donald Trump. So they're basically saying, scorched earth, we're going to release whatever we get, and we're not going to try and, pick and choose. Like they could have said, we're not going to release the the Bill Clinton data or the Bill Clinton evidence, but we are going to produce Donald Trump evidence. They didn't do that. They
Well,
said we're
look,
going to
it's
produce
just
it all.
protect all kids at all costs, then it's
100%.
anyone can get it. It should be a scorched earth mentality. A
Yeah.
D or an R in front of your name shouldn't save you.
Right. And that's what's heartening about this. Like now, Democrats, unfortunately, have a history of like trying to do the right thing and then losing elections. But the consequences right now seem to be, or at least the momentum, the political momentum in the country seems to be completely against Donald Trump. His ratings are dropping. Democrats are winning elections in places like the North Carolina commissioner, or
Yeah.
sorry, the Georgia commissioners elections. They just lost an election in Miami for mayor by a huge margin, right? And the question, I think, the big question that we need to answer as depressed pollsters, who I hate, but they are in the best position to answer them, need to answer: is this people voting against Donald Trump or is it people voting for Democrats? But to go back to the Epstein evidence that's being released, this is Democrats making their case to the American people that they are worth voting for and that they are willing to fight for something.
Yeah, and the results, like, it's all intersected, right? What we've seen in these recent elections, is it, though, the momentum? You're right. That's a fair question. And we've seen that. I asked that in Tennessee. Is it Democrats gaining ground or were people just not showing up? And I think it was people just sort of dissatisfied and disenfranchised. And some of those folks who did flip from 2020 to 2024 may be having buyer's remorse. And we talked about that last week of people who were like, wait a minute, I voted on the economy and the economy is shit. This guy's a businessman that's supposed to be fixing things. We've been waiting on the tariffs. Why is it that groceries are still expensive? Why is it that he's saying things like just buy $1 or $2, to try to, I don't know, spin this? It's crazy.
Right, and you think about, like, specifically back to the Epstein files, who is the audience for the Epstein files? Now, in my opinion, I'm not a parent, unfortunately. I'd love to be a parent someday, but I'm not yet. I think that the audience for this Epstein file data dump is parents,
Yeah.
people who've had kids, especially people who've had daughters,
Yeah.
because these people were scum. Like, they were total scum of the earth. using the power dynamics to prey on young women, young girls, or excuse me, girls, right?
Yeah.
And, the question again becomes like, do people recognize this as a dump by House Oversight Committee Democrats, which it hasn't been reported that way. You know, it's mostly been reported as the House Oversight Committee is publishing this, which allows people like James Comer, the House Oversight Committee chairman, who's a Republican, to kind of like hedge, to kind of take, credit. Now, all of these Republicans were at the White House last night for a congressional White House party, right? He had the congressional Republicans over for a party. And these are people who honestly, I could tell you, for the most part, couldn't care less about the victims of sex trafficking. They are political animals and they just want power. But there are some people who are starting to break ranks. Marjorie Taylor Greene is obviously the most famous of them. Nancy Mace, for all of her flaws, she too voted to release the Epstein files. These aren't the beginnings of cracks. So, like, people try to characterize them as, is MAGA dividing? Is MAGA starting to like rupture? No, no, no. This is an explosion. This is a nuclear explosion of the MAGA base, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene, we've talked a lot about this in the Capitol. Why did she turn on Donald Trump? And I honestly do believe that she went home to her district. She realized that the tides were starting to turn. People's health care were going up. They were
Medicaid
insane.
cuts.
Medicaid cuts.
There's about 1.5 million Georgians that are going to have a really bad next year because of these cuts. They're calling for a special session. Of course, she was getting an earful in Georgia.
Exactly. And, when it comes in the paradigm of rising prices, there's the reality that this president, Donald Trump, was a creep for decades with the king of all creeps, Jeffrey Epstein. They were buddies, they were pals. This wasn't like a passing fancy. It was a relationship that maybe fell apart after decades of fruitful pedophilia, but it was something that like he's now trying to not deny. He's now trying to make it go away. A lot of people will say that one of the reasons why he's being so aggressive toward Venezuela, one of the reasons why he's having Pete Hegseth take such an aggressive posture around the world is to try and start a war to distract from this. But there is one carrot here that we should really discuss that the audience should know, right? And that's that there's no enforceable mechanism for the Justice Department to release these files. If the Justice Department decides next week that they are not going to release the Epstein files, there's no law on the books that says Pam Bondi could be sued or or I guess it's her
Yeah, but
deputy
I
could
don't
be
think the
sued.
American public would go for that. It has been built up so much. It is a powder keg waiting to explode. And these drips and drabs, they better not be to sort of throw a little bit of meat before they decide to close the door on all the intel. I mean, people will be fucking pissed.
Yeah, but Pam Bondi's a lackey. Like the thing is, she doesn't care
They're
what the
all lackeys,
American
Pablo.
public think.
The
She
buck
doesn't. No,
stops
but
at Trump, you know?
right, exactly. So if Donald Trump, and he clearly has not wanted the Epstein files to be released, if he says, no, we are not going to release these files, and Pam Bondi, Attorney General Bondi, if you release these files, you're fired, then she's probably not going to release the files, right? So I think that and again, it's really interesting that they're being released into the Christmas season because that's the season that has as you know, some of the lowest news audiences. It's times when no one is paying attention to the news. So it's the perfect time to basically say, we're not going to do it. It's also, from a strategic perspective, the best time to release the files because no one's paying attention, because there's going to be like a lot less pushback. So it kind of depends on like what their strategy is. But so far, they have Stephen Miller out right now running interference, saying some of the dumbest shit imaginable on television. And they have Pam Bondi behind the scenes working with the Justice Department to redact the victims' names. And that brings us to Byron Donalds. Byron Donalds, the congressman from Florida, right? Now, after the vote to release the Epstein files, me and Prem Thacker from the Zitio, we cornered Byron Donalds and we asked him straight up, do you support the release of the files unredacted? He said, no, no, no. There are victims of the files. There are people who have their reputations that they've built since they made these mistakes, and they shouldn't be punished for what they did in the Epstein files. And I asked him straight up, I was like, do you believe that Donald Trump is a victim of the Epstein files? And Byron Donalds wouldn't say. So the big question that becomes like, as they go through the files and try to redact sort of who's who and what's what within the files, how much of Donald Trump's place in the files is being redacted? And more importantly, how many people have access to these files? The Bondi said that 1,000 FBI agents were taken from their roles and put to redact the files, to read through the files and give her a briefing on what was in the files. So we've talked about this on your show before, Nick. Did 1,000 FBI agents each get the 100,000 file document, or did each one of them get 1,000 pages or something like that to search through? So, because the question becomes like, who has the native file and who has the file that's going to be released?
Yeah, what can
Because
be
if it
leaked?
gets released, then Donald Trump comes out and says, "I've been completely exonerated," like he did with the Mueller report, which is a tried and true test. It's a tried and true technique that they've used in the past that Bill Barr, the former Pam Bondi's predecessor in the White House, used before, to come out before the full file is released with a summary and say Donald Trump did nothing wrong and the Russian, he didn't collude with
When there
Russia at
is an
all.
odor of mendacity, there is
Yeah,
something smells, right?
right.
It would strain common sense to think otherwise. I mean, these are terms that you would likely hear from a federal judge that doesn't clear you of anything, but is a very choice way to say you're not entirely clean either.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I mean, what's really the issue here, I think, is Epstein was selling access, it appears, because everyone is worried. The conservatives get worried that, our kids are going to get molested in bathrooms by trans people. And what really happens, and what really is more common when people get molested, they get molested by somebody that they know,
Right.
somebody that has repeated access to them, somebody
Right.
that gets to see them over and over and over again. And they normalize this power dynamic of a relationship, and then they strike.
Right.
And it's this abusive power on girls who are impressionable. I tell my daughter that she needs to have such a keen sense of self awareness and that the voice in her head needs to be a strong one because the world out there rips down women at every turn,
It does.
even though it's mothers that are the backbone of this world. No one is ever going to love you like your mother loves you. No one is ever going to give you the nurturing, the empathy, the sympathy like a mother would. And a mother that's not a sort of conditional love for any mother. Any mother sees a child suffering, they will have that natural, innate, instinctual reaction to protect. And we
Right.
see this happening. That's the audience here in the Epstein files. It's moms that are pissed off out there. It's
Yeah.
women on the front lines that we see that are the badasses that are standing up to the authoritativeness and to the authoritarian regime here, to these fascism strokes that we're seeing on the streets of America. It's women all the damn time. And it's women, God willing, that will help get these files released and hold whoever is responsible for the actions that they committed responsible ultimately, man.
Let's hope. I mean, Pam Bondi's a woman, but you know, she's Donald
Fair,
Trump's. You know what I mean? This is like,
fair.
I mean, there's a parallels between like the Jeffrey Epstein and the Ghislaine Maxwell's of the world to the Donald Trumps and the Pam Bondis of the world. It's like sometimes they're just women who want attention, who want power, who want access. They're people, not just women who want attention, who want access, who want power, because that's what basically explains the entire cabinet secretariat of Donald Trump, right? It's
Well,
just,
let's take that there in terms of access and wanting this individualism, power corrupts absolutely, and talk about DHS Secretary Kristi Noem
oh my
and how
God.
she was
Yeah.
raked over the coals during the
Yeah.
Oversight Committee on Thursday. Tell us about your reporting.
So Kristi Noem appeared before the House, as you say, before the House Homeland Security Committee on Thursday morning, and she barely got into her opening statement before people started protesting. There was a priest. No one. He got taken away by the police before anybody could actually confirm that he was a Catholic priest. But he was dressed. He probably wasn't a Catholic priest because he was dressed as a bishop. And if it was a bishop, people would have known. But somebody dressed as a priest started saying that Kristi Noem was going to hell. That God is against her. Other people started protesting, and it just kind of went downhill from there for Noem. Like the Democrats came prepared, and the ranking member on the Homeland Security Committee, a longtime statesman, Benny Thompson from
Yeah.
Mississippi, came out and said, you should resign. Like you are an embarrassment. You are not making America
He
safer,
didn't
and you should
ask her. He
resign.
told her.
He did. He did. And the each Democrat had prepared questioning. For context, the Democrats had held a special hearing earlier in the week where they had brought together a group of U.S. citizens who had been detained by ICE, who got to testify, who got to tell their truth to the committee.
And if you
Now,
watch this program, we had the attorney on Tuesday, Michael Carrillo, who represented two of those five Americans who testified in front of Senator Blumenthal and Representative Robert Garcia.
right. And, by then it was clear U.S. citizens had been detained by ICE. But Kristi Noem, because she's an idiot, like, let's be real, like, Kristi Noem is the biggest lightweight in the entire cabinet. Like, she's somebody who has never really done much. She ran for Congress in a state where like 20 people vote. And she, before that, she was a farmer. Her family was a grifting family who took
She's a
federal
dog killer,
subsidies.
self-admitted.
But worse than that, she's somebody who like lived off the taxpayer. Like, she's been taking subsidies for her farm and then telling people that subsidies, like the that
Isn't
government welfare is
that's where
bad.
you could sting them for the conservatives, the farmers who talk about no, I don't take federal money. What about the subsidies on your farms that help you so we don't get another dust bowl happening here? Like what about that?
Right.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. Sorry to interrupt you, man.
Well, I'm just saying, like, Kristi Noem is somebody who's been a farce throughout her political career. In Congress, she didn't do much. As governor, she didn't do much except try to be famous. She's what's called a pick me. Oh my God, pick me, I'm Kristi. And Trump did pick her as the Homeland Security Secretary. People think, according to reporting by Ben Terris, according to reporting by Adrian Carrasquillo, this is somebody who is picked because she's dating Corey Lewandowski. That's the allegation, right? Corey Lewandowski is a longtime Trump fixer, sort of an enforcer. He's more of a doofus. I've met Corey
He
Lewandowski several
was
times.
the Trump operative, though. When they had those five people that got him elected president, Corey Lewandowski
Right.
was in the mix for a long time. And, you guys might recognize him because he was a CNN contributor for a long time, and he was on
I
the
forgot about
national
that.
stage for quite a while. And now
Yeah.
you're hearing from his wife,
Thanks,
who's promoting
CNN.
her book.
Yeah. Uh, it was really, all of these people have spouses and they're having like a very public affair, right? So Kristi Noem comes in there and she's just going to power through it, right? But Seth Magaziner from Rhode Island was like, no. He did something that more Democrats should do. It was a master class, as our friend Ben at Midas Touch said, in hearing, like, in actually, like, in an
Yeah.
oversight hearing, right? He said he put a witness, as the husband of a U.S. service woman who's been detained in ICE for 4 months from my home state of Missouri. And he said, will you stand up? And, this is, I forget his name, but he's from Troy, Missouri. And he made Kristi Noem thank him for her service. And then he turned to her and was like, but you have his wife in immigration detention. He also had a guy who's in Korea appear on a tablet, like a staffer held the tablet, like live streaming this guy who'd been shot twice in 1989, serving the United States in Panama in the military. Then Kristi Noem also deported, right? So you have the woman, the wife of the Missourian. She was detained, and ICE gave the reason of that she had processed two bad checks 10 years ago for a grand total of $80, right? And that's why she deserved to be in perpetual jail for 4 months, which is ridiculous. And you have the other guy who'd been taking two bullets, done more sacrifice for this country than Kristi Noem ever will, right? And she had to apologize to them, and it was beautiful. But of
It was a
course,
masterclass, and this idea that Trump, that veterans don't get deported, it's a lie, man. I mean,
it's a
we
lie.
went to the office of deported veterans in Tijuana, where I thumbed through thousands of files of people who had served and were combat military veterans and were deported anyway, because some who had admitted that they had lapsed their paperwork, they didn't take care of some of their things. The
Right.
point is, though, morally, is that the DHS secretary has broad discretion over who decides, this moral discretion over who decides, who gets supported and who doesn't. She can give a humanitarian waiver to these individuals
She
and
absolutely
decides to
can.
play technicalities.
And the funny thing is, people like her, people like Bondi, all of the cabinet secretary, it's crazy. They're all afraid of Stephen Miller, right? Like, Stephen Miller is the person who's driving this agenda. So Kristi Noem will do whatever Donald Trump tells her, but there's this tacit implication that anything Stephen Miller says is coming directly from the president. And that's why people keep reporting, and I think that they're right, that Stephen Miller is just taking advantage of an old man, right? Like, Trump is a dirty old man. He's a disgusting bigot, right? But, that notion that he wants this combat veteran to be deported to Korea, that he wants this lady who processed 2 bad checks to be sitting in ICE detention in Missouri is absurd. But Stephen Miller wants that because he's a tiny little man and this is his agenda, right?
Even Miller
So,
wants the end of immigration. He was on a recent show over the weekend where he was talking about if you take immigration out of the statistics, our education numbers grow up. He wasn't
right.
talking about unauthorized immigrants here or illegals, as they point to them or call them. He was talking about anyone who's not European, anyone who's not native born, non-white Americans. I mean, that's what he's really talking about. It's not so quiet of a dog whistle
But
anymore.
even if he
And
was talking about undocumented immigrants, these people score better scores than the gringos, right? Are you serious? Going to any school, right? You're going to find that the immigrant parents make education a priority because it's central to the opportunity that this country promises. This country says that if you get your education and blah, 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 and it's not necessarily even true anymore. The value of a college education, especially, has been dropping, but immigrants still believe in that, and they make their kids get good grades, and they make their kids out compete everybody, right?
yeah, yeah.
So it's when he says stuff like that, it's like a total bald-faced lie. The sad thing is that you have that little whelp on Fox News, I don't even know his name, who just sits there and just fuck that guy. Are you serious? Do your fucking job.
I want to talk
Answer.
about optics, man. I want to talk about optics because
Right,
I was out here outside the other day, and occasionally I'll bring the TV out here and we'll watch. We were watching, and I went by and seen what's her name, Judge Perino, that had her own show on, right? And now she's like has
right.
this high level position in DC. This is after the National Guard troops got
Yeah.
shot and killed, and she's
He's had
out
a
there.
series of high-level failures too.
And I'm
Like,
looking at this, Pablo, and I'm like, this is just like what a TV show would be. Like this is what the cabinet would look like on a TV show if we were casting what people should look like. It's all about casting, and it really draws back to this reality TV show foundation of the modern day Trump, this reincarnated reality TV superstar who has taken that programming and applied it to the politics of Washington, where
right.
he has convinced the American public that the person that screams the loudest or who looks the richest is actually the smartest and is the wealthiest. When we know that the richest people that you and I have ever met, man, they dress like this, bro, even like more casual. This is probably too dressed up for a wealthy
Yeah.
person, right? You got stories of Warren Buffett continuing to take the bus and eating at McDonald's. I mean, like
Right.
this idea that he has convinced people who are maybe like have these strong convictions and maybe aren't unnecessarily as educated about things, that he is the idea of what a poor person thinks a rich person is.
Well,
He
that's
is
it.
the idea.
It goes back to the term "pick me," which "pick me." I got to give due credit to my fellow Notre Damer, Erin Gloria Ryan. She works for Crooked Media. She has one of the best podcasts around called This Fucking Guy. It's part of the Hysteria podcast. And she goes through a different guy every week on YouTube. This fucking guy. And she's done Stephen Miller. She's done Donald Trump. She's done Christy Nobe. She's done Marjorie Taylor Greene. This fucking guy on YouTube. But she refers to a pick me, right? As these people who are just like that. Like, look at my suit. I mean, I have been to the Heritage Foundation happy hours before. I've been to the White House parties. And the people show up there dressed like 1939 with a double-breasted suit and a fucking, with a pin on them that's like,
They don't
it's one of
got
the things
high socks and Nike Cortez on.
yeah. So that's the thing though, the most powerful people, the most people like Steve Bannon, who are among the most dynamic of the group. If you actually have a conversation with people, Steve Bannon is actually a pretty good person to have a conversation with, not because of what he
Not
says, but
surprised.
because he's compelling.
Yeah,
Right?
it's
He
interesting.
dresses like Che Guevara, like a 2025 version of
Got
Che
the double
Guevara.
polos
Right.
on. He's
Everything,
unkempt. He's like bloodshot eyes.
but
Got the
these
cat
other
glasses.
guys, the
Yeah.
pick-me's, right, who show up dressed to the nine, like they just walked out of suit supply, right? These people have nothing to say. They just want somebody to say something to them. They want somebody to notice them, right?
And
And these
isn't that
people,
the problem with politics when we should elect our politicians to serve us, where this role is the ultimate act of service, and being in Washington gives you that opportunity to help people. Instead, people just help themselves, man. They
right?
just help themselves.
Yeah, and that actually happened yesterday in the hearing with Kristi Noem. So Kristi Noem was scheduled to be at the hearing until 1 p.m., right? She gets up and leaves at noon, right? And she says, I'm sorry, I have a FEMA operations meeting that I have to go to. The
Sure you
FEMA
do.
operations meeting had been canceled. Everybody knew it had been canceled. She knew it had been canceled, but she just is too fragile to do her job, right? She
You know
has
she's gonna get
idiots like
fired. That's
tiny
why,
little Greg
Pablo.
Bavino. What's that?
Yeah, she's right with Bovino. She's losing the title of this face of immigration to Bovino, and she knows she's going to get fired, Pablo.
She has
She's
to know.
about to get fired.
She has to know. She and Hegseth both, right, are both on the ropes because there's a degree of liability that comes from the presidency. And unfortunately, I hate to say this to the viewers, right? But the people who get fired first are also going to be the first to get pardoned when they get charged for crimes during their tenures as cabinet secretaries. That's the chess game being played here. So if I were her, I would want to get fired. I would want to step down so that when all the criminal charges comes from all the laws that she's broken, Trump pardons her, right? It's always there's a saying here in Washington, you don't want to be you don't want to be the person who turns the lights off in the White House at the end of a presidency. That's the most vulnerable staffer in this town, right? And Kristi Noem is obviously not going to be the staffer. He's like, you know what I mean? But the sad thing is, though, and this is what I hate. This is what I hate about the networks, right? I saw you had Aaron Parnas on, and he
Yeah,
said that
yeah.
the networks are going to be around for 50 years. The Washington Post is going to be around for 50 years, and that might be true. But as these networks continue to get consolidated, there's a machine in place to resurrect the reputations of these failed public servants, right? Like Katie Miller is a great example, Stephen Miller's wife. She
Yeah.
is being resurrected first on CNN, now on Fox News and all the rest. They're setting her up for success. And the question is why? Like, what substance does she bring to the table other than being Stephen Miller's wife, right?
She was
So
in the communications division or department in the first
at
Trump
DHS,
administration.
yeah.
Yeah,
But again,
yeah.
okay, so what about Luis Miranda? He ran the communications department at DHS for 4 years, right? They don't try and resurrect the Latino who did a good job. They try and resurrect the white girl who's somebody's
Because it's
wife.
DEI, baby. No one
It's
wants a
DEI. It
DEI
is
hire or an
DEI,
affirmative action hire,
but she
right?
is
It's just
DEI. She is
bullshit.
DEI 100%, right? So Kristi Noem, unfortunately, and Pete Hegseth, you could totally see an arc where they're wildly successful after their term, and they get
Yes.
to spin their service to the taxpayer as something that was bold and courageous and noble and stuff like that.
They're telegenic and they've got a personality. You know, Hegseth comes from that world. He's
But
got a
then
makeup
that
department.
But
Yeah,
that creates the incentives for the next cabinet secretariat, right? For the
yeah.
next presidents, for the next Homeland Security secretary to just do what they're told, even if it's illegal, to never push back and try and cash in on the back end. Now, that doesn't work for Democrats as well as it does for Republicans. It worked for the Obama gang, right? Obama was a relatively scandal-free president, and his people
He did
have
do those drone strikes in Pakistan and Afghanistan, man, and Iraq. I mean, I don't know,
well
man. He went
compared to
after
what
whistleblowers, but relatively speaking.
relative to
Yeah,
what came
yeah.
before and what's
Yes.
come after, he was so scandal free that his staffers has done well. But for the Trump people, it's like they didn't because Merrick Garland was, I hate to say it, a pussy, right? He basically didn't hold anybody accountable. Jack Smith, all these other people, it's just like Biden picked people who were pushovers to hold people to account from the administration before. The idea of not wanting to appear political took precedence over the necessity to hold people accountable. And that DNA in his presidency comes from the Obama term, where he refused to prosecute bankers, where, he just the Democratic Party has to realize that the prosecutions, the accountability mechanisms that they have once they take power, right? If you don't use them and the other side does, right? The American people get bored with what you're doing. We sat there and watched with bated breath 18 different times when Donald Trump was going to be prosecuted for, any number of things, financial crimes, election crimes, the
Up until
Epstein
very
files.
recently, he was out on bond for charges he was facing here in Georgia
Right.
until
Right.
they squashed them, right? I mean, like, we've been waiting for accountability. We've been waiting for this,
For
Pablo.
like almost a decade, you
Yeah.
know? Like,
Yeah.
and the thing that sucks is, you know, even now, if you ask Democrats, what they're going to do. And I do ask Democrats what they're going to do specifically to hold the ICE agents who are beating our community, our Latino community in the streets. Because everybody right now, this is what the hearing was about, the Democratic special hearing on last week, and most of the hearing yesterday, most of the pushback. I'm going to have to plug my phone in here for a second.
Oh, it's okay. We only got a couple minutes anyway, man. I got to run here.
To keep talking about U.S. citizens detained by ICE, what's already getting pushed under the rug is the immigrants detained by ICE, right? What about the illegal immigrants? What about the undocumented immigrants? They are human beings too. Our Pope said that their dignity is just as important as the U.S. citizens' dignity, right?
Amen.
But
Amen.
that's not what's surfacing. I'm at
Yeah, shout out
1%,
to
so
the
if I
Pope.
die, that's
Shout
why.
out to the Holy See press office for getting back to us. I asked Pope Leo for an interview. They respectfully declined, but they did acknowledge us as an outlet. So
Wow.
shout out Pope Leo and the Holy
Shout
See
out
press
Pope
office.
Leo.
Hey man,
It's
we have a
American popes.
Amen. My brother, well, I have
Oh,
you
yeah.
for the last few minutes here. I got to run before the top of the hour. Oh,
Uh,
hell yeah. Oh, well, I should
yeah.
say, forgive me, Father. Heck yeah. What else do you have going on, man? What are you working on this weekend? What do you have on the horizon? Talk to us.
Just painting, man. Painting. I got to catch up on some things. I get depressed. I get depressed as hell processing these videos,
I know.
listening to these morons talk on Capitol Hill, watching the idiots start at the White House. So I paint and
Yeah.
I listen to NPR. I listen to podcasts and stuff. And then I feel better by the end of the week. Also, I got a bum knee. Like I got a terribly bum knee. So it's like I haven't been able to be up on the hill as much, which stresses me out. But other than that, I paint and hopefully feel better.
Dude, the sandbox that you love to play in is the congressional, like Capitol Hill, man. We're all the congressmen and women are. It's just amazing, dude. It's amazing to
Yeah,
see you do your thing. I'm glad you're taking care of your mental health, man. It's something that we talked about yesterday with Aaron Parnas. And, look, man, I've just been going through it too. We talk offline a lot, and it's really important because we're seeing the worst of the worst. We're
we
seeing
really
like
are.
literally the absolute worst of the worst. And I know for you, you still hear those videos when they're not playing on your phone. And
I do.
I feel you, man. I know that you do. And I looked you in your eyes in DC, and I know you do. And so I'm glad you're taking care of yourself, man, because we need to, because people are counting on us, Pablo. We got to
They
be
are.
in this for the long haul, baby. I'm
We
counting
do.
on you.
It's a
Hell
marathon,
yeah.
not a sprint.
Dude, thank you so much again for doing this. We're going to be doing this on a weekly basis. We're trying to figure out Thursday, Friday. I don't know. The point is that we want to do this every week because there's a lot of crossover. Pablo and I have great discussions, great conversations. We know you guys got a lot out of this. We're going to clip the best of this, post it, and keep rocking out, man. Anything else, Pablo?
Nothing else. Got
Me
1%
neither.
on my phone. Otherwise, I'd talk all day. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much to all you guys who joined. Have a great day on purpose.